My name is Uelida, and for those of you who don't know me, I am both a clinical psychologist, a neuropsychologist, and an artist. This is my first Instagram live post, and bear with me. So what I thought is that I wanted to introduce this work to you this morning, and because it's both Mother's Day and it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and both topics are clearly quite close to my heart, seeing that I've got 2 children and spend a lifetime in the mental health world. And I think it intersects quite nice with this work in particular and with art in general, because art and psychology are actually quite close to each other. And so this work is also going to be on display and for sale on the Market Square exhibition being held in Lake Forest, Illinois. If you want to go and have a look, you can also see it online. I've got a brand new website which I've launched a couple of weeks ago, www.uelidasmith.com. Good luck with the spelling. I will also post this on my Instagram, and if you go in the bio, it is there for you to look at. So this painting is called The Red Scarf, otherwise known as Woman Neglecting Their Household Duties. It has that name because my husband coined it for me, because the household chores were piling up in the house and I couldn't be bothered to do it. I felt very strongly I needed to finish this painting. And the other thing why I wanted to talk about this painting is because it intersects with topics quite close to my heart, as I've said. So both with Mother's Day and with Mental Health Awareness Month, I think this painting represents something quite personal to me. I'm very proud of this painting. I think it's the first work where I was able to start off not knowing what I'm going to do and to allow the images just to flow out of me. And that is actually for a psychologist who spent a lifetime in an analytical space, problem solving, using language to make sense of the world, to actually abandon those tools and to go to a place where language was an obstacle, was quite hard for me. And I'll talk more about my journey away from language into the process, into the flow, and literally stepping out of my own way so I can be allowed to be. I'll talk more about that journey in future Instagram live posts, and hopefully I've got the technology going, then some of you can join me and we can have some more discussions about it. But for now, I want to stick to this, and to start off with, I had these stencils that I bought when my kids were born, thinking that, you know, we will do some really creative stuff. That never happened. The kids weren't interested. Everything was a mess. I couldn't cope with all the mess. And so these stencils got packed away. And I found them recently, and I was playing around with them. And I started just putting these stencils down. And then I saw some wallpaper, and I wanted to get this idea of a scene happening, but that's also quite 2D and has some kind of almost like a wallpaper quality to it, highly decorative, highly fun, almost on the verge of something kitsch in a way, is what I wanted to communicate. And so this is how I constructed this. So all of these are stencils that I painted over, and then these peonies I just did freehand. And this painting, I had this idea of a red coat hanging, and I've got a thing for red coats. As you can see, I'm wearing my red jacket today. And also, I think it is a link for me to my childhood. My mum had this incredibly gorgeous red velvet coat, which she would wear in daytime, with this high-waisted red velvet skirt that was up onto her ankles. I still have this. I've never been able to wear it in daytime, and there was something about this confidence she must have had, or maybe it was just the 70s, but in my mind there was quite an idealized mother represented within this red coat. And so I had this idea of painting a painting which honors my mother. Our relationship was quite complicated towards the end of her life. And I'll talk more about that in another painting, which is specifically about her, which was also very important for my journey to get to this point where I could actually paint with this kind of freedom and abandon. So the idea of the red coat was something that was quite idealized, it was quite beautiful. It also represents the real world in a way. It represents these beautiful things we put on almost as an armor to go into the world, to be stronger, to be more than we are, and to almost present to the world a self that might not be our truth. And so this red coat here I see very definitely as sort of representing my mother and the beauty that was her. She was a fashion designer. In those days we called them seamstresses, but she was a fashion designer. She made dresses, she made clothes, she made outfits, hats, shoes, gloves, and I used to sit in her shop and watch her make these most wonderful creations. And I think my love for fashion and my love for this kind of highly decorative art came from that space, and I think honoring that also allowed me to actually develop more. And so the red coat and the red scarf, it sort of represents this moment when this woman sort of took off her coat and her scarf, these trappings of the real world, hang them up just for a moment. She wanted to step into this garden and just lose herself in daydreams. And it seems from this that she's been away for quite a while, because the flowers on the coat has come to life, and it's actually growing, and it's attracting the hummingbirds. And I think it says something about myself when I stepped into the unknown, into this journey of art, this fear that I am going to get so lost in this process that I may not be able to find my way back. And also perhaps a fear of the dream world. And I think that is why many of us are scared of daydreaming, are scared of just sitting, reflecting, and let thoughts just go through our minds, to step into, dare to dream, because we are so scared that things will flood in that we don't want to engage with, that might drag us down. And I'll talk more about that in the Instagram video I'm going to make of another painting called The Divine Goddess, where exactly that process happened for me. And I think there is something about stepping into the unknown which is quite overwhelming, and there's a fear that we will be overwhelmed by things that we cannot control. As a psychologist, I've seen that a lot in my work, and I think as an artist, it's fine to know this in your head, but to go through that process, to step into the unknown, to not know where you're going to come out at the other end, is incredibly daunting. And the beauty of this is that I understand now why I abandoned art in my late 20s, because I think it was that unknown, being young, being scared, being so vulnerable, wanting to make it in the world, and not actually knowing where to go with this, or where is this going to go with you, is very frightening in many ways. But this painting was about the other side of that. So in my own life, I had quite a tumultuous journey to get to this place. And this painting was celebrating that journey. So this woman has taken her coat off, she's taken her scarf off, she's hanged them up, and she wants to just step for a moment into this beautiful garden where she can be with her daydreams, where reality isn't intruding, where it's telling her what to do, where there's expectations on her. And then as I was drawing this appeared. This was supposed to be a parrot. And the idea was to create this totem animal that represents chattering. Because when I stepped into the art journey, I had these most horrific internal dialogue, which was all quite negative. It was all jack, you're not going to do this, you're not going to make this. And this is what I want to discuss in a separate Instagram, which I'm going to do tomorrow. And I wanted to create this totem animal, this animal that is a beautiful animal of the garden, of the forest, but it's actually somebody that's just repeating the same habitual thoughts and phrases over and over, and that these aren't necessarily helpful to us on our journey. And as I painted it, clearly I can't do a parrot, but it ended up being a white eagle. And then I went and I looked at the symbolism of the white eagle, and the eagle really represents soaring higher, becoming more than what you can be. So it's a very potent totem animal in the American Indian mythology. Also in Western cultures, it has this idea of being able to have a bird's eye view, to look down on what you are doing with some distance and have a keen eye and to protect. And I think once I've painted this, when I step back, I definitely had the sense of this very powerful animal being very quiet, very watchful, and almost protecting the scene. And it had this idea for me of vulnerability, that the moment when we step out into the unknown, when we take our coat off, we become quite vulnerable. We have no confidence in the trappings of what the world has to offer. And it was almost as if this image emerged to tell me, I'm looking out for you. I am your spirit guide. I'm soaring. I'm watching you from above. And I'm looking after your things for when you are ready to return. The hummingbirds also just emerged out of nowhere. I think I was painting this and the idea of a hummingbird came up, because there's a lot of hummingbirds here in my garden in Illinois, and I've never actually seen a hummingbird before. And I've been watching these birds, and they're delicate and how they hover in this kind of suspended motion, and they popped into my mind. At the same time, I was listening to music and they were singing about a hummingbird, and I thought, wow, there's a kind of synergy here. And I just started drawing these hummingbirds, and I drew them freehand, and then I went onto Google and just looked for what they looked like so they just sort of emerged, which for me is always a sign that I'm in the flow and that something right is happening here. And when I looked into the hummingbird, it's quite a frivolous totem animal. It represents the everyday life. It represents love. It represents sort of finding love in the everyday details of our lives, not looking out for the big things. And I suppose, considering that this red coat is my mother and these hibiscus flowers represent my childhood, we have these massive bushes of red hibiscus in our garden, and I always thought they were the most frivolous flowers, and that God must be a woman and that she must have this fantastic sense of fashion to create this flower. And I would peel the layers off, and then I would pull all the stamens apart to actually get to that fleshy bit at the bottom where the seeds were kept. And for me, it was just this most beautiful flower of femininity and abundance. And I think these birds are attracted to this energy. And then in the bottom corner, there is a silver snake. Now, the snake appears in most of my works, and for me, when it makes an entrance, I know that it's more than just a picture, that there is some emotional significance, that there is some symbolism around this, and that I need to pay attention. My personal totem animal is the snake, and the snake has come to me both in real life and in my dreams in many, many forms, and I feel quite a close connection to it. I'm petrified of snakes, but in my spiritual life they are quite important. My son is waving at me. They are quite important symbols for me, and I draw strength from them. I see them as transformation symbols because they change, they grow bigger, they shed their skin. They are not the same creature from one time frame to another, and therefore they are quite powerful. People always ask me, oh, I like this, but why is there a snake? And I think our Judeo-Christian history has casted the snake as this creature of deceit, as because it's also the animal that gives Eve the apple. So it has this kind of notorious position in Western mythology. But I quite like that because it's something that tells us to be careful. There's always a devil in paradise. There's always that thing that's going to trip you up. There's always that thing that's watching out for you, that wants to take away something that's yours, something that's precious. And the snake here is just a very gentle reminder to be respectful of our fragility, of those moments when we put our guard down, when we go into the garden to daydream. Make sure that you have your protectors around you, and make sure that the hummingbird is there, that animal that will find the beauty in everyday life, because it will warn you of the intruders. So in a way, I see this as this woman who has stepped into the unknown, but in the process she has found these beautiful creatures who's coming to her to say that I'm there for you and that we will guide you into the unknown. And this is also going to be the starting point of my next Instagram live post around the Divine Goddess and how I came to paint that painting. That painting actually preceded this one, and it provided the gateway for getting to this place where I can feel the confidence and the freedom to take the coat off, to remove the scarf, and to step out into this beautiful garden and look at all the treasures. So from me to you, happy Mother's Day. Be mindful, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. We must look after our internal worlds. We must not be scared to reflect. We must not be scared to daydream. And we must trust that our totem symbols are there, that they will protect us and that they will be there for you. Have a wonderful Thursday. Lots of love to all of you. Cheerio.